But at the end of the video, we should have something that looks like this. We're going to start off here with our blank scene and our blank model. I'll leave a link in the description with this model if you want to follow along using this one, but you can use your own if you want. We're also going to need Blender. I use 2.91. The version doesn't matter as long as you can see your model and vertex paint. That's how we're going to get the cheeks moving and our jaw moving in and out. So back in Unity here, we're going to create our first C# script, and we're going to call it character creator, and then when it's done compiling, we'll open it up, and we're going to need to address a few variables here, so bear with me. First, we're going to want to address, after deleting this, our skin mesh renderer, and we're just going to call it mesh. Let's call it mesh renderer. Yeah, we'll make it easier. Next, we're going to want to address the array of the vertices that we're grabbing from Blender. So, for example, I'm going to be showing you how to change the upper jaw. So we're going to create an array here, and we're going to need both the right and the left side of the jaw. So right upper jaw list, and then left upper jaw list. Alright, there we go. We'll close that off, and then a few more things. We're going to need to grab our vectors, or not our vectors, sorry, our vertices, which are grabbed by vectors. So a vector3 array, we'll call it vertices. Yep, there we go. And then this, and Blender to Unity, Unity registers vertices by their position and their vector3. So this is how we're going to grab them and then edit them later. Next, we're going to need our list of colors. So colors, color, which is also going to be an array, and we're just going to call it vertex colors. Sorry, Canadian spelling. Next, we're going to want to reference our mesh. So we're just going to call this body, and the reason why we need to reference this is because it's what we're editing, and the way editing meshes works in Unity is that it doesn't reset every time you re-enter a game. It saves the mesh data that you edit even in runtime. So we're going to need to create a clone of this body and then edit it, and then use this body as reference to reset back to our default, just in case anything happens or just for general customization. And next, we're going to need a list, so we're going to call this a public list, and then we're going to grab, colors. We're just going to call it list, right? Yeah, we'll just call it list. There's new list color. There we go. So this will be the actual colors that we change. And lastly, for now, a public bool. This is just to make our lives easier in the future. We'll call it editing mesh. This will be when we need to address the meshes. Okay, now we're going to start with a void start function here. And first we're going to reset our mesh. This is just for when we're testing and making sure everything runs smoothly. So we're going to go mesh renderer dot share mesh. Oh, my bad. Mesh renderer dot share mesh. And we're just gonna reassign it to body that we will assign later. And then we're gonna want to set up our colors from the actual mesh itself. So vertex colors equals new color, and we're going to want to set it up to the length of the amount of vertices, so we can go through every single vertice and make sure that the colors that we change are addressed. So body dot vertices dot length. Go, and then we'll apply the vertex colors to body dot colors. Alright, we got our base start function off. Next, let's go. That's all we need to do for that. And now we're going to move on to the section where it actually grabs the vertices. So next we're going to want to grab vertices from our mesh. So our vertices variable that we created earlier is going to be vertices equals body dot vertices. This is also a resetter, so this will reset, because when we change vertices, we're going to need to reset it back every now and then or just, you know, overall changing. And now we're going to get into our for loops. So there's going to be 2 for this section here. First, we're going to grab from the vertex colors, so vertex colors dot length, and when we're doing this in Blender, usually all the vertex colors, they start out as white, and we change it to a different color just to grab it later. So red, for example, we'd want to grab red. We want to leave white out because the whole mesh is white. So we're going to do if vertex colors dot index, does not equal color dot white. So we don't want it to be white. So anything that isn't white, we're going to grab inside here, and we're just going to add it to our list. Dot add vertex colors I. There we go. So now our list is only going to grab the colors that we changed from Blender, and that's the purpose of this right here. And then we're going to add another for loop just to assign it to these 2 variables up here, right upper jaw list and left upper jaw list. So another for loop, and this time we're going to use the vertex color length again, just to get the whole list. And this is just for organization. There are cleaner ways to do this. You can merge these together. I just do this just to make it a little bit simpler. And right before we do this for loop here, we're going to want to expand our the list that we want. So we're going to start with the right jaw list. So right upper jaw list equals new int, and then we're going to do list. So the amount of variables inside our list here, and then inside vertex, we're also going to just double check here just to make sure nothing wrong is getting passed through. So vertex colors I is not equal color dot white. There we go. And then we're just gonna create a new int up here. That's right. An int. We're just gonna call it index. This is just so it grabs what we need. So like in a list, we'll have a list of say 50 items here, and we only want 10. When it grabs that index, we don't want it to grab 0, we want it to grab 1 to 10. And that might sound a little confusing, but it should make itself simpler as I show you what I mean. So next we're just going to assign the I to our right upper jaw list. So right upper jaw list, index equals I. There we go, and then our index, this index goes in here. Index equals 1. There we go. So we're going to start off with that right here, and then we're going to jump back into Unity, wait for it to compile. You can assign this anywhere, but I usually just assign it to my model. So I'm just going to assign it right there. And we're just going to plug in our variables. So we're going to grab our mesh from our model, and then grab our skin mesh render. I should say something like body height, it could be anything. And our lists here are going to be empty for now. So now jumping back into Blender, just save that just to be safe. Jumping back into Blender here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab this side, and then after this side. But first we're going to focus on this side. So we're going to go to vertex paint here, make sure all is selected, go into our tools. I'm going to be painting it red. You can do any color just as long as it's not white. And you're just going to gently paint the section that you want to edit. So like this will be the upper jaw, for example. And make sure it does, sometimes it'll paint on the other side, just make sure it doesn't do that. And that's all we need to do in Blender. We're just going to re-export our model. And there we go. And it'll take a second depending on how complex your model is. There we go, jump back into Blender. It's going to be a lot of hopping back and forth, especially if you have a complex character creator, but it's totally worth it. So now we're just going to, check off editing mesh, and then we're going to let it run. So just press play. And when we open up our list here, it should be it's not populated. Okay. 1 second here. I'm just going to try to do a little debugging and see what the issue is. So I found it. Our issue is just making sure that in our model here, that read and write is enabled, just so we can read the model itself. There we go. We're just going to apply it, and now it should work the way we want. Boom, and there's our list. So grab the colors that we painted on the cheek, and inside our right upper jaw list, these are the indexes of the vertices that yours will probably be different. It usually is. It varies every time you import a new model. This will be my list for the right side of the jaw, and I'm just going to copy this component here, get rid of play, and paste the values. So our right upper jaw list here, and we want to clear this list. So every time you do this, you want to clear the list, reset it back to 0, or it'll just keep adding. It doesn't remove itself. So it'll be a manual remove unless you want to add that feature inside the start function. So now that we got these variables, we're going to want to grab the left jaw variables. So back inside Blender, we're just going to erase this. Let me just get white up here. Sorry, there we go. Just erase it, bring it back to white, and then do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to grab something similar so it looks something like this. There we go. Re-export. And then once it's done, we can jump back in. Now before you hit play, and this is very important, before you hit play, we're going to want to jump back into our C# script here, and this is just the repetitiveness of this kind of code, and just paste the left. So you just want to reference, and these two right here are the references to what you want to edit. So make sure, I've done this many times before, I've just left it by accident and I've just rewritten over the wrong list of indexes. And then when it's done compiling, there we go, we're going to want to grab our last list here. This one's a little shorter. That happens often, and it might cause that, it might throw an error. I'll show you how to fix that later. We're just going to want to copy component like last time, paste component values, delete the list, and inside here we should have our list of vertice references here. And I'm going to show you later why we have the right and left. It's just when we edit the vertices and make it a lot easier. Next we're going to want to jump back into our C# script. So we're done with Blender now. We got our references, and we're going to want to create a function for our slider. So this is going to be a UI slider, and we're going to call this one, let's call it public void change upper jaw bracket. Then we're going to want to put a float in, so it could be a dynamic float later, and we'll just call it value just to be simple. And then, sorry, one moment here. And inside here, this is a typical reset that I do here, just to make sure this is just to double check, triple check that there's nothing funky going on when you're editing this. Is we're just going to want to copy this code up here where it says vertices equals body vertices, and we're just going to want to put it down back here. There we go. And inside here, there are save functions you can do if you want to use player prefs. So for example, you just do player prefs, and you would just put in the value here, and this will just save it. Or you can do the encoding way, where you can completely make it hard for people to change this kind of stuff. But usually with stuff like this, it's not that important. You can just use player prefs. And next, we're going to want to. So that's typically what we do, is we just have the value here. So this is just going to dynamically set our value. We can leave it like this unless you're saving. Next, we're going to want to change our vertices. So we're going to make a new function down here. I'm going to call it public void change upper jaw vertices. We're also going to want to pass the value through. So this function does look redundant, but in the demonstration that I showed, I used this function just to save the value, just to keep it all organized and prim and proper. And inside the public void change upper jaw vertices, sorry, we're going to want to do a couple of for loops. So inside here we're going to do another for loop, and this is where we actually edit our mesh. And we're almost done. This tutorial is almost over. It's pretty short for what we're doing. So next we're going to go to for, and then we're going to do vertices.length. So we grab all our length vertices and we go through all of them. And then inside here we're going to do this is where we edit the right. The left side is going to have to be a separate for loop. There's a reason why, and it's just so that it pushes out instead of all pushing in one direction, which will make your character look completely weird. So what they're going to do is if our index equals right upper jaw list, and before we continue here, we're going to want to create two new ints here. Similar to this, we're just going to call it second index. You can name it whatever you want, whatever makes it easier for you. Honestly, name it however you feel. Third index. There we go. And this is just going to have a similar function to our first index here, where we just grab the vertices that we want. So we're going to do if, and this one will be second index. So if second index. There we go. And then inside here, this is where we change the vertices. So for vector 3, we're going to create a new vector 3. Vector 3, we'll just call it vec. It's not that important. This is just like a changer. And equals new vector 3. So we're changing the vertice right now. And then just as reference, we're just going to do vertices index I dot x, and we're going to do the same. I'm just going to copy this to make it easier. Just like a regular vector 3, x, y, z, and then we put in our changes here. So for example, with this one in our case, we're going to want to do x minus our value. So the float, the slider value that we have up here. And this is for up. A lot of these are depending on what you're doing, but this is what changes your mesh. Next, we're going to want to change our vertices, the vertice that we just edited, and apply it. Sorry, my spelling is a little terrible right now. I equals vec, and then we're going to want to add our second index like the other time. And that's it for changing. That's it for changing the right side. We're just going to copy this, and for the left side, add one for the left side. And the way we have to do this, just change this to left upper jaw list here, and then change this to third index because we have a completely separate index. And then also down here, apply the third index. Now, because we're doing we're expanding outwards, this is going to be the opposing side. So instead of subtracting the value, with this one, we're going to add the value. And this varies. So there's a lot of this is just testing and making sure it works out the way you want. And at the end of this, just for reset value, we're just going to set second index to 0. Oops. And third index to 0. Bother me a little bit there. And then at the end here, we're going to create our last function. Public. Not all these have to be public. I just like putting in public in case I want to access them later. And we're just going to call this upload our mesh data. There. Inside here, we're just going to do a little resetting here. So our shared mesh here, shared mesh. Sorry. Mesh renderer dot shared mesh, share mesh equals null. So we're going to wipe it out, and then we're going to create our clone here, like I said earlier we should do. Mesh renderer dot shared mesh, sorry, equals brackets mesh dot instantiate brackets body. So this will just create a clone and assign it to our mesh renderer, and then we're going to set our current resetted mesh. Keep doing that. Shared mesh is going to equal, oh I'm sorry, not equal, sorry, shared mesh, and we're going to set the vertices to our vertices that we edited in our previous function. So we're just going to call it vertices. There we go. And then a few things just for the mesh, just to save you some hassle, maybe some lag later that might happen. Just to be safe, we're just going to do mesh render.shared mesh, and then we're going to recalculate our bounds. Mesh render.shared mesh. And we're going to optimize it just to make it save some frames, whatever frames it may be. You want to conserve your frames. Mesh renderer, and lastly, we're going to share. Actually, we're going to actually upload the data that we just assigned to false. It's no longer readable. Go save it. That's all the coding that's left for this. I'm going to cut ahead to when I have the simple UI set up. Sorry, so I made a little mistake here. So we're not actually down here. I fixed it already, but I'm going to delete it just to show you. So up in change upper jaw, we're going to want to reference our functions. So change upper jaw vertices, and we're going to pass through the value. And then we're going to want to do the same down here. So at the end of change upper jaw vertices, we're going to want to put in upload mesh data, and that should be it. Let's save here. There we go. And now that we actually have all our vertices here, we're going to want to make sure that we uncheck editing mesh here, just so for debugging purposes, and it doesn't throw any errors our way. Next thing we want to do is click on the slider. So if you made a slider, this is a blank slider right here. And when it comes to max value, we're going to want to set it really, really, really low, just because of the positioning of the vertices and how fast they edit. So something like this should be fine. Your model might be different, so you play around with this a little bit. And on value change, we're going to drag in our script here and change upper jaw. Up in dynamic float, make sure it says dynamic float. This is very important. There we go, and all that's there. And let's just give it a shot here. Should be working. No. Then we got a little error down here, and this is the error I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to show you just how to fix that. So the error comes from these two right here, and they're pretty offset. They're different numbers, and that causes problems as well. So we're going to want to round it off to a nice even number. So for example, so this is 22. I'm going to add 1, make it 23, and at the end of the list here, just set it to 0, so it's not really editing anything. And then set our list to something round like 30. So it'll just be a bunch of zeros added on to the end of our list. And then we're going to do the same for the left upper jaw. And at the end here, 30. So it matches our right upper jaw. This should work, and this should be the end of the tutorial. Let's just give it another test here just to make sure. Yeah, so you see my jaw is moving in and out. And that is how you create a customization system similar to Skyrim. Thank you.